So let's talk about impact questions, questions that have impact. Now I'm going to show a very simple slide here and the difference between closed and open questions. Last time when we looked at Ouch, we agreed that our prime controlling habit is that unconscious habit of asking way too many closed questions. So here are our open questions, and in any language around the world, this is a universal truth. These are open questions. Why, who, when, where, what and how. And what and how are our two greatest tools as coaches. If you notice that who and when and where, they're great open questions, but they're looking for details. And we've got to be very careful about asking questions of detail, because the chances are we're asking those so that we get information in order to solve the other person's problem. So they're great open questions, but be wary of using them. You'll notice there's a little asterisk then against the question that begins with the word why. Now, why is a great open question to ask people. It looks for motivation. But there is a problem. If there is the slightest threat or stress in the relationship between us, between me as a coach and you as a direct report, or me as your manager, then you might hear the question why as an accusation or even an interrogation. And you might feel that you need to defend yourselves against me. And if you're going to defend yourself by explaining why you did something, it may well also be that you'll be encouraged maybe to blame somebody else. So any question that starts with the word why can actually be turned into a what question. What made you decide that? What were the conditions around you at the time that caused you to make that decision? Is a much more respectful and less judgmental way of asking that question. So let's talk now about best questions. What and how? At what age were you when you were at your very finest as an asker of open questions? Yeah, about 3 years old. If any of you have 3-year-old children or have had 3-year-old children, or indeed you were once a child of 3 years old, you will know children of 3 years old ask stunning open questions. So if a child of 3 years old instinctively knows how to ask an open question, how is that? Did you sit your 3-year-old down at that age and teach them what and how questions? I doubt it. Children of 3 years old, open questions are their survival mechanism. Open questions is how they navigate this incredible world that they've come into, that they need to learn more about. Open questions are for learning. Open questions are driven by curiosity. And the other beautiful thing about a 3-year-old child is a 3-year-old child has no shame whatsoever. They have no issue showing us that they are ignorant of that which they ask. Fast forward maybe 30 years, 40 or even 60 years, and we struggle to ask open questions because we're afraid to show that we're not in control, that we don't know all the detail. We've become afraid to be curious. And unfortunately, that's what stops us learning. So again, if I come back to my friend, the brain, with our survival brain here and our thriving brain here, the survival brain doesn't like open questions because it can't control the situation. It is the thriving part of the brain that likes open questions. Because what the open question does is it gets that person mining their neocortex for rational, logic and moral answers to their own questions. And this is why, again, the science of coaching really works. Now, there is also a rhythm of a one-to-one or a coaching conversation that we can introduce that has a rhythm of questions, impact questions to it. And this is a framework that you're probably familiar with. It's called the GROW framework of coaching. And this is a framework that was introduced to the world by Sir John Whitmore. And Sir John Whitmore, probably the father of coaching in business, and wrote a very famous book that is still highly in print today called Coaching for Performance. And he introduced the world to the GROW model. And there it is. And it's in those 4 steps. What is your goal? What is your reality? What are your options? And what will you do? Now, if you think about this, we can construct a 5-minute coaching conversation in the back of an Uber coming out of a client meeting. We can construct a 30-minute one-to-one. You can construct a 3-day offsite or even a home site by using the rhythm of the GROW model. And the reason it works so well is because it appeals to our neocortex. This is the way our neocortex loves to process information. What is it I'm striving for? Where is my goal? What is it that I'm trying to achieve? If I'm really, really clear about where it is I'm trying to get to, then I stand a better chance of getting there. But where am I now? What's happening to me? And that reality part maps my territory, strengths and weaknesses. What's happening to me right now? How am I feeling about things? Where are the people around me in their own process of change towards the goal that we're trying to achieve? And then options. This is the part where we can really exercise the creative part of people's brains and hearts. We can get them to experiment, to rehearse, to play. It is this part that it builds the trust, and asking that simple question, what could you do? There are so many ways of asking that question. If you had a blank sheet of paper, what would you do? If you could start again, what would you do? Using words like imagination. If you were to imagine, using words like vision, you're inviting this person into a very, very creative place where they can start to get ownership of their own strategies and their own ideas. And the most powerful question of all only has 2 words. The most powerful options question is, what else? You take somebody into a place and they tell you what they think their options are. And then you say to them, what else? And it's one of those lovely moments where you stop them in their tracks and they have to pause and think, and they have to mine more deeply into their brain to find even more information. Notice that it is already in there. You're just helping them to articulate. And so we come back to the science of why coaching works. I ask you to mine into your brain with options questions, and you have to pull that information. Now, that information at the moment is not in language. It's sort of in a mush, sitting somewhere in your brain. And the process of pulling that into your prefrontal cortex, turning that into language, the process of articulation means that information that I possessed, but I'd not made the connections and I hadn't turned that into words, that information is now available to me to strategize upon. How do you know when you've made another human being think? Well, 2 things happen. The first of all, they go quiet. They're having to think. It's why it's so important not to fill the silence if they're thinking. But they do one other thing. This is universal. It is completely involuntary on their part. And that is a flick of their eye contact away from you. And it looks something like this. You ask me one of those beautiful what or how questions, and this is what I do in response. Oh, that's a really, really good question. And notice, this is the neurological signal that I am searching in my brain. Somewhere I don't have the data to answer that question straight away. I have to go and look. And in that moment of silence, as I'm digging in, looking for that data, you are being a stunning coach. All you've done is ask a great question. And then the final step of the GROW model, the will part. What will you do? Because sometimes it's not enough simply to have a conversation where somebody uncovers ideas or strategies. We are their manager. We are responsible for their performance. So sometimes we need to take that next step, that final step of getting accountability. What will you do? What is the very next action step that you will take? And we need to hear a specific action. Otherwise, we leave them in a space where they're not committing. So this is why the GROW model is so helpful to us. And the great thing is, you can tell people you're using it. There is no shame in going to your team and saying, I'm skilling myself up to be a better coach for you. Notice how they won't try and dissuade you out of this course of action. And so tell them what you're doing. I'm trying to get hold of my unconscious controlling habits. I'm trying to ask a lot more impact questions. I'm also more consciously using the rhythm of the GROW model just to really help you through a process, because the more you do that, the more you educate your people to do it for themselves.